I am back in New York City.
Hey, I'm walking here. I'm walking here.
I am ready to chat. Let's roll with the Steam Zone today.
Don't worry about that. Actually, that ain't a bad way to pick up insurance, you know.
Hell yeah, brother. Welcome to Texas, where we are getting ready for the Union 1 factory launch. This is freaking awesome. This is a group of patriots, people who worked at Tesla and SpaceX and have built the coolest technology we have on planet Earth. Today are getting ready to open their very first factory to manufacture material for the defense industrial base, their very first product, 155 howitzer shells. We've been burning through these things, sending them to Ukraine, sending them to the Middle East. America's stockpiles are depleted. Our capacity to build has been diminished. Not anymore. Starting today, the Union boys are here to turn that thing around. I'm psyched to be on the ground.
Got it. Peace through strength, right? The details of strength matter. Cool weapons matter, but you need ammo to load in those weapons. So this sounds like a great initiative. Excited to maybe get to play with them in my reserve job.
Well, the factory will be operational here in Q4 is what I've been told. $50 million seed just to get this thing ready to rock. Let's roll the tape on some of the behind the scenes of what we saw today. This facility is huge.
That the real power of America, the power that you give to your government leaders to deliver, comes from the heartland, from the places where we do things and make stuff. It matters so much.
The end of the line will be prepped and palletized, and then they'll be stored at the end of the building and then go directly out of these doors to the back end of the building or back through the high bay doors that are on the other side of the wall.
That is awesome. What else do we have on deck this week?
So, Ben, it was a big week in Washington, D.C. It was AI Day, thanks to the Hill and Valley Forum and our old friends at the All In podcast. They were announcing the release of the AI action plan from the administration. This is pretty big. Are All In hosting this thing, not CNBC, not Fox News. It's a new day in Washington. What do you make of that?
Yeah, this is exciting. They're moving forward. They're doing a lot of stuff, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on why you think this might be important, or is this different than what's gone on in the past? Is this just language? What does this mean?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of thought for a while about how the Trump administration was going to tackle AI. There was like hey, are we going to have a Manhattan Project for AI? Is it going to be totally laissez-faire, hands-off? And the reality is it looks like it's going to be somewhere in between. It is definitely pro-developer. This is pro-AI labs. This thing is pedal down all the way. Nothing but gas, absolutely no brakes on making America the leading power for the AI arms race. At the same time, it's not total laissez-faire. In the executive orders that the president signed in this action plan, there are lots of roles and lots of responsibilities for different government agencies and departments. We'll talk through some of them. Did anything stand out to you?
Yeah, what's different is there were some different logos up there with the president. Tell me about that. What's your take on these on the new media environment here?
Well, listen, man, All In being the preferred mouthpiece of this administration was probably not on a lot of people's bingo cards even a year ago. David Sachs, obviously the crypto czar and AI czar for the president. He's brought his so-called besties along. I mean, look, here's what it means. The old media is dead, man. Like, there's no CNN, there's no Fox News. Trump is suing Fox News. All In is leading the day. They're bear-hugging big tech is what this said. Like, we've come a long way from Section 230 repeal, conservatives angry at big tech for what they saw was finger on the scale in the 2016 election in favor of Democrats. We're gone from that. We've got Jensen in the front row. Zuckerberg is buddies now. Elon, we don't know exactly where he is, but that's okay. By and large, tech is on the side, or the president's party, the president's administration seems to be very favorable for big tech. All In is maybe just a symptom of that.
Yeah, while I think it's really interesting content, and let's get into some of that content, let's not take the All In guys too seriously. I kind of view these guys as some court jesters, right? Let's remember where they were in 2020. They are just moving with the winds. They are not people who have influence, right? I think they cosplay after something happens to pretend they're in power, right? Check out Chamath's tweets on any issue 4 years ago where he was. Let's see where they are in 4 years. Listen, these guys are amazing marketers, They're not in the arena. They are commenters, right? They are not changing and influencing policy. They are cheerleaders for whoever's in power on both sides. So, I'm excited about some of the stuff in the content on the AI stuff, but let's not overrate what's going on with the all-in guys.
Well, we've steamed Chamath on this show before. I suspect it won't be the last time. But actually, Ben, it brings me to an interesting point. Did you ever see the case study on Jason Calacanis in business school? Did you ever read that?
No,
Okay,
we missed that one.
This is funny, right? Jason is a case study, not of an investor, not of an entrepreneur, but for as the number one networker, kind of in tech in Silicon Valley. The case study is about how this guy, without ever really building a company of his own, has kind of finagled his way into the good graces of some of the most powerful people on earth. If you remember when the lawsuit was going on because Elon had tweeted out funding secured around his acquisition of, I actually don't remember. Maybe it was a take private. So that went to court. There were text messages from Jason to Elon basically blowing smoke up his ass about how amazing it was that he was buying Twitter and how this was Jason's dream job and he would go anywhere and do anything. So this has been his pattern for a long time. He is not a dogmatic guy. He is not a principles guy. He is a proximity to power guy. And I think we're seeing that play out in real time.
Wow. Yeah. Let's get into some actual content, though. Enough of the Jason commenters.
Absolutely. Well, let's kick it off with the president's remarks at this AI summit. Before we go too heavy, Ben, did you see what President Trump had to say about the name AI? Did you see that?
No, tell me about it.
All right, well, let's go ahead and play a little clip here.
I don't like anything that's artificial, so could we straighten that out, please? We should change the name. I actually mean that. I don't like the name artificial anything, because it's not artificial. It's genius. It's pure genius.
It's not artificial, Ben. It's pure genius. So what do you think? AI or genius intelligence has been playing on the internet today. Trump wants genius intelligence. GI. What do you think about GI?
Yeah, GI. Is that referring to the GI Bill? Thanks for paying for my MBA, government. Taxpayers too. Is that GI what I talk about with my gastroenterologist? Well, we don't need to go into details there, but maybe we should rename the podcast the Genius Zone now.
I think we have a better chance of that happening than AI switching to GI. But you gotta give the president credit. He is a master marketer, and if he continues down that path, it would not surprise me if AI quickly became the Gulf of, I mean GI very, very quickly. All right, let's close that one out and let's get into some real stuff, Ben. So the AI action plan out of the White House yesterday has three big areas that have recommendations and some policy around. The first is accelerating AI innovation. The second is building AI infrastructure. And then the third is leading in AI diplomacy and security. At a high level, we'll go through each of those, but at a high level, what do you think of the action plan itself?
Yeah, I think this is a lot of good stuff in here. There is a lot of excitement about the way forward for America, for our policy apparatus. I have some concerns. I want to make sure when I think of these things, there were a lot of important people in that room, like we talked about, the big tech leaders. But is this built for them? How are we making sure that there isn't just an incumbent advantage or a new incumbent advantage for the open AIs, these new big players? Let's not shut the door behind them and make sure we continue to have this environment of growth where new people can keep coming in. And so who's representing working people? Who's representing small business? I want to make sure there's no slowing down there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. One of the things we did see in that first section around accelerating AI innovation, and we can go ahead and jump into it. There were some things that gave me a lot of hope for the small business portion of this. They talked about making compute available. They talked about investing in interpretability and evaluations ecosystem. So making it clear that we were measuring apples to apples. Right now, you can kind of publish, you can fudge the numbers, you can choose what evals you're kind of talking about when you declare yourself, the greatest model on this thing or that thing. You can train to the test. Ben, I actually negotiated around compute. In my past life was, doing some of this.
I thought you just made podcasts all day.
Yeah, well, thankfully for the world, I've added some economic value in my years. Not a lot, but some. So we negotiated from compute, and here's what I can tell you: getting access to the highest end clusters is really freaking hard. When we had to get a couple of NVIDIA H200s on short notice, I mean, I talked to probably 3 or 4 or 5 providers before anyone could really do it, and even then, it required rerouting traffic from a U.S. based or from Canadian clusters or other overseas European clusters to free up space. So we've seen this, and this was not necessarily for the small upstarts. These are some big incumbents. So what we know is that the compute is in fact a limitation. And so making that available will allow more small guys to come in here, train models, and build novel applications. So I'm really excited about that. The only other thing I want to hit on this first bucket, accelerating innovation, is that the government or the Trump administration here has decided to bear hug open weight models. What does that mean? They're models like Meta's Llama series, where the weights are given to developers so you can run that model locally. And we actually saw China in the last year or so training some of their government purpose models on the back of Llama. So it was very controversial. Would the US government decide that that should be ITAR restricted and that we shouldn't be exporting that technology? In fact, we've seen the opposite approach here. So what does that mean? Pedal down. It means we're focused on the future and what's going to come and the benefits from American models trained on American IP and American values being part of our soft power. So I think that's a pretty significant development.
Yeah, it's exciting to see us moving forward, moving fast, keeping in mind what needs to happen in terms of safety, but moving forward with that attitude of accomplishing something and then figuring out the safety, I think is where we can just move past issues and just build. And of course, there's work to be done to make sure we're being safe, but excited for us to move fast here.
Speaking of moving fast, the second section was about AI infrastructure. What stood out to you here, Ben? What's your take on the recommendations around infrastructure?
Yeah, I'm obviously big on abundance, right? Let's do it. Let's streamline permitting. Let's make it easier to build stuff, right? Let's make it better to hire people. Let's make it easier to train someone on something new. But I want to make sure that we're not just doing temporary exceptions to rules. I want to just change the rule. I don't want waivers, because when we get in the world of waivers, we get in the world of guy 1 gets a waiver, but does guy 2 get the waiver? So we need to make sure that it's not just waiver by who's closest to the people in power, that it's just everyone, that we have open season on competition and everyone's able to move fast.
They call them abundance Ben, baby. Just more faster. We love to see it. Yeah, I'll just say one thing on this, which is what stuck out to me. Honestly, this was fairly hands-on for a set of government programs. This is more of a government involved than a fully laissez-faire approach. I said it at the top. Department of Labor playing in the workforce development stuff, the permitting still running through federal agencies. So, on one hand, while we've dodged and we've cut on some of these agencies, this is the government saying, hey, on these top tier priority issues, we do need our agencies to play a role. I thought that was kind of interesting. It didn't strike me as something that was particularly partisan one way or another. I think this is a document that could have come really from either party, which I actually take as a good sign.
Yeah, governing isn't done in the extremes, right? Governing is done balancing all these stakes and all these stakeholders. So tell me, though, I'm excited about this third category, diplomacy and security. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, this is kind of interesting, right? Is that AI exports should be a big part of America's soft power. They talk about exporting an American AI bundle. I imagine that the competition to be a part of the American AI bundle will be fairly fierce because there's some significant benefits to having that stamp on it. At the same time, there was some question around, hey, are we going to throw away the security and the safety concerns? And this section answered and said, no, we're not. In fact, there's a specific recommendation around becoming world-class at evaluating national security risks of these models. Ben, this is the work I was doing, especially with respect related to CBRN or chem, bio, rad, and nuclear threats emanating from these models. This stuff is really hard because you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with flawed, limited soda straw assessments, and when you're talking about potentially nation-state actors who have virtually limitless time, not limitless resources, but quite substantial, given another tool, given more options, in the long run, you're kind of going to expect that there's some hit to that safety net, or there's some hit to security, but that on balance, the good outweighs the negative.
Yeah, I think there's always a balance between hard power, soft power. I think about my deployments overseas, where hard power is the military, right? But soft power, when we think about diplomacy, it's not only our State Department, it's also who's buying hotels, who's buying the newspapers, who has influence across different stakeholders of companies. So there's a lot of ways to think about diplomacy, to think about security, and absolutely our private companies are a part of that story.
I think when people look at Ben Jacobson, they just see a lot of hard power. Like I'm maybe more of I don't know if I'm the soft power guy. We need a friendlier face to be the soft power, but Ben is a hard power guy. So it'll be interesting.
I'm a full power guy. I want to use it all. Full range of power.
He's an abundant power guy. You can't have too much power. Then before we move off of AI Day, which was, big deal in DC, and the memes are, I'm sure, going to keep coming. The photos and the videos out of that are crazy. One more thing that didn't make it into the plan itself, but the president made some remarks about it, was copyright policy. And he talked about, you just can't everybody can't get paid for every little article. Everybody can't get paid for every song. We just can't do it. What did you think of the president's comments around IP protections?
Yeah, this is one of those thorny issues that I think is really complicated, right? There are arguments that I resonate with on both sides. Incentives matter, though, right? When you think about our biotech, why we have so many great biotech advancements in the United States, a lot of that has to do with our patent protections, right? But we also understand that these patent protections aren't forever, right? We make drugs go generic, and that's important too, right? We need drugs to go generic, and that helps people. So switching lanes from biotech to literature, does Shakespeare need to get royalties if we're training a model on him? No, right? I think we can all agree that's ridiculous. He's long dead. There's no one alive that is a relative to him, or at least knew him well. But things matter. Things change. The Wall Street Journal today maybe should get some royalties, right? We have reporters that are alive today that are working hard, that are getting scoops. I don't think their take should just be taken from them. So there has to be a balance, and I think we have to figure it out slowly. We got to keep iterating. We can't be brash, but balancing all those things matter to get a really good ecosystem where we still get good content produced and they have the right incentives to produce it, but we allow AI to progress forward and use that really good content in a way that benefits everyone. Let's democratize AI and make sure it gets to everybody.
Yeah. Look, the only thing I want to add on this is, strong property rights are kind of the foundation of our capitalist economy. So you can't decide overnight that we're going to throw that out, that we're going to have, as you said, patents for drugs or blueprints for manufacturing designs or schematics or things like that. We can't just all of a sudden make all of that accessible. There's more work to be done here, but I think what the president is saying is that he's not going to prosecute these AI labs for training their models on past potentially copyrighted content, which I'm sure was a sigh of relief for them. All right.
Yeah, and I think it's something we need to think about also, like property rights evolve, right? I think when America was founded, probably air rights weren't as big a deal, right? I don't know if they were defined, but then we had planes and then we could build skyscrapers and air rights became a thing, right? So as the world evolves, as technology changes, we need to constantly redefine and evolve our understanding of property rights. And it's exciting to be at a moment where this is happening.
Let's go ahead and close out that tab.
Hey, Noah, big question for me. I like to spend a lot of time fighting in the comments on LinkedIn. Any good fights I should be aware of this week?
He's a brawler. It's hard power, Ben. He's back. As a matter of fact, it's funny you should ask. This week, Ben, we had two heads of two counter UAS or counter unmanned aerial systems companies going at it on LinkedIn, but in a very, I would say, a productive way. You had Mike Wire of Allen Control Systems, and then you had Michael Laframboise of Auerelius Systems. Both of them diagnosed the same problem, which is that these pesky drones are threatening American service members, our allies, potentially even civilians, and we need a way to counteract them. One company, Allen Control Systems, has a much more kind of analog or kinetic approach, which is basically a machine gun loaded on a turret, on a truck or a boat. And Michael's company, Auerelius, is more focused on energy or lasers. And so, look, they're both reasonable approaches. I think they both have their merits. What we saw here was two founders kind of, yucking it up a little bit, going a little back and forth, kind of sharing their perspectives. What do you think about the argument, Ben?
I honestly not going to pretend to be smart on the answer here. But what I think taking a step back is exciting is I think back to was at a great event with Matt Grimm, one of the founders of Anduril, and he talked about we were in Silicon Valley at that moment. He talked about how many engineers here are working on getting us more addicted to our phones. How many engineers here are in the world are working on a B2B SaaS go-to-market playbook verse on LinkedIn. And then, you see the comments on LinkedIn. Oh, comment here to get my B2B SaaS playbook. What I think is exciting is people talking about these really serious, important issues. So I'm excited. I don't know the right answer on the debate. I think we'll get closer to the right answer, though, if we're having these debates, if we're discussing these things. And so I'm excited to keep leading the fights in the comments and learning.
Yeah, I'm pro. And I would say, look, open invitation. If these guys want to come on the Steam Zone and hash this thing out, I think these are all good-natured discussions about merits of an approach. Let's have them in public. You guys are welcome on any time. And frankly, hopefully we'll make that a whole segment here. I think there's a bunch of technologies where there's just slightly different approaches to the same problem. This is going to play out. It's going to happen between the lines. This is why we play the game. We don't want this to be one in a stack of paper in the back corners of a program office. We want it to be one on the field and through the merits of these approaches. So love to see it. Kudos to those guys for yucking it up. Let's go ahead and close that tab. Okay, speaking of a good-natured fight, Ben, we haven't talked about our friends at TBPN here on this show, but this week, Jans Sramik, who's the founder and CEO of this California Forever project, which is the goal is to create kind of a whole new city in California, a foundry, a shipbuilding community, an hour north of Silicon Valley. Very cool. A lot of people are excited about it. He went on TBPN and had some thoughts. Let's go ahead. I want to check in with what Jan had to say.
There's very few places in America where you could work in a factory and bike to work. Everyone keeps talking about we're gonna reindustrialize the country, but nobody's talking about the reality that nobody wants to work off some random freeway exit in the middle of Texas.
2 hours in the desert. Yeah.
Exactly. You drive to the factory an hour and a half from your house.
Okay, so Ben, he's saying nobody wants to work 2 hours in the middle of the desert next to a Burger King or a McDonald's. Putting aside for a second that I'm a huge McDonald's fan and love me a good Egg McMuffin and a hash brown for breakfast, what do you make of Jan's take here that people really only want to work in big metropolitan areas?
Yeah, like going back to abundance, people should want to work everywhere. This isn't a pie that is shrinking. It's not a pie that isn't growing. We need to grow the pie everywhere. And when you think back to America's roots, when you think to the 19th century, right? Did Silicon Valley exist? No. Who knew? Who knew at all that San Francisco was going to be what it was, at Silicon Valley, that we were going to find oil in Texas and have this huge boom and get Houston and Dallas. Places in America attract dreamers. And it's not built when it's empty. That's when dreamers come in. That's when the innovators come in and they build. So I don't know where the next boom is going to happen. I want it to happen wherever the innovators come, wherever they start building stuff. And so I don't know if it's in California. I don't know if it's in Mississippi. I want it to be able to happen everywhere. So we can trust in the American dream. We can trust the people that are going to go take those risks. And we shouldn't be telling them where they should or shouldn't go.
Yeah, I think, look, a lot of people are very excited about this project. It's not at all knocking what he's doing, which sounds awesome. I think the spirit of the reindustrialization movement, though, is very much not about how do we concentrate more people and more wealth and more jobs in a few highly populated metropolitan areas. It's about how do we rebuild the heartland of this country, make these jobs available everywhere. Company towns, factory towns have been the backbone of this nation for a very, very long time. And seeing more of that, I'm out here in Texas. There are companies that are hoping to open up facilities around the country. We want more of that, not less of that. I think diversification is a good thing. With that, let's go ahead and close that tab. All right, Ben, that brings us to our next article here, which is from our good friends Austin Gray, friend of the show, was on last week, and Stephen Rodriguez. The piece is called Titans, Trailblazers, and Translators, Forging a Unified Defense Industrial Paradigm. It appeared in War in the Rock's new Cogs of War periodical this week. What did you take away from this article? Maybe lay out the core argument for folks and what you thought.
Yeah, I think what struck me in the article is sometimes we get myopic, right? I'm a startup founder. I think startups are the only way. But the truth is there are a lot of roles to play, right? And those roles are important that we have, right? We need the primes. We need the traditional players. We need the neo primes, the Andurils of the world. And hey, we need startups challenging them, making everyone move forward, exploring new ideas that seem crazy that might be amazing, right? And we need an ecosystem that is constantly moving. And part of making those things moving involves translators, right? Your Booz Allen Hamiltons, the Deloittes, the Accentures, right? They matter because they provide a service, right? When it's working, they are helping translate, they are helping integrate things together that otherwise wouldn't happen. And so that's an important role. And we need a system where everyone gets to play the role, where everyone's challenging everyone and there's competition. But let's not forget that there are a lot of different roles to play in this ecosystem.
Undoubtedly true. I think the question I would have, Ben, is you can innovate on any one of those things. We have people innovating on hardware. We have people innovating on software, trying to do it better, more efficiently or more effectively. My question would be, is there a modern approach to systems integration? Is there a modern approach to translation that maybe has not been the focus of a disruptor or a startup to date? I can't really think of any who's gone straight at that piece. It'd be interesting to think about if there's a way maybe to bring some of not that Booz Allen doesn't do good work, but to bring some of that into the digital age as well.
Sounds like something a VC would invest in. And we see a lot of interesting stuff that we see the TechCrunch articles of this company raised X million. I kind of want to break down for you how I think about those numbers when I read them in a TechCrunch.
Ooh, so a little VC action. All right, let's go ahead and close out this tab, Ben, and we'll hand it over to you.
Okay. Exciting. VC math. All right. So when Noah raises his next round for a big company and you're reading about it in TechCrunch, and Noah goes down and says, we raised 24 million. That's actually not the question the VC is asking. They're asking something else. The VC is asking, what % do I get of the company? So that implies something, right? If we click into this math here, there's a kind of a formula we're thinking about, right? There is the valuation, the post-money valuation. And what that really is you take that investment, you divide it by the % sold, right? So if Noah raises 24 million and the VC owns 20%, that implies there's an $120 million valuation for Noah's company. So what does that actually mean? Well, that means in 5 years, because the VCs don't care about today. They are thinking 5 years down the road, right? So if it's 120 million today, it's going to need to be 600 million in 5 years to get Noah's investors the return they need, right? So what does that actually mean, 600? Let's click into that. Well, that means is that the exit value, when he sells that company in 5 years, and he's going to have a lot of people bidding for that company, really underneath that is these two things, which is the future ARR, so the future revenue recurring, and then the exit multiple, right? And the markets determine the exit multiple. So let's click into this, right? So we could have this kind of low, medium, high of revenue, right? So we'll say the exit multiple is 10. Call it 10. It could be 12. It could be 8. But let's call it 10 here, right? So if we have $5 million in revenue, and that 10x multiple, that's a $50 million valuation. That is a bad outcome after 5 years, right? No one just had a $120 million valuation, just went down to 50 million, right? Okay, let's up that revenue. Let's get it to 20 million, right? Well, that's a 200 million valuation. Okay, that's not that great after 5 years. That's a mediocre outcome. But if he hits 60 million in revenue, that's a huge valuation. Noah just hit a home run for his investors. Target hit. Well, let's talk about how to get there, right? There is this thing we've all heard of, the valley of death, right? What does that actually mean? When you are traveling through to get to those big revenue numbers, you got to unlock scale, right? How do you do that? Let's click into that. So we all know you start in pilot land, right? Small revenue, non-dilutive revenue, SIBRs, sitters, right? You establish credibility, start to scale. Start to move in, do some cool stuff with DIU. Maybe win a phase 2. Start focusing on phase 3. Hey, AppFit is out there. There's a bunch of these programs. These are just some. And you start scaling. You're waiting. You're biding your time until you hit the program of record, right? You've got a budget line plussed up. It is exciting. And you've won a program of record. But that can take 5 years. So let's think about how many programs of record you need to do, right? If you're going to get to some huge revenue number. Well, there are only so many programs of record out there, right? You could win a $10 million program of record. That's a huge deal. You could win two $20 million programs of record. That is huge. But even if you do that, right, you take your 1 times 10, your 2 times 20, and the math here is wrong on my slide. Excuse me, Noah, but we are getting to $60 million in revenue, right, to get him that $600 million valuation. I have to believe a lot of things here to come true, right? As an investor, when I'm thinking about underwriting risk, I am thinking that Noah is going to go out and win 3 huge programs of record. That is crazy, right? I trust Noah. He's amazing, but that is asking for a lot. So really a VC, they're not thinking every company's going to hit these things, and especially in the defense tech world, but maybe a 1 in 10 chance of hitting those home runs. So when you see those numbers, start to think about the journey of like, what is this implying about number of program of record wins? And that's how I think about it.
Thank you, Professor Ben. Wow, what a tour de force. I will say, I'll give you credit, that guy is a much better looking version of me. He's got a full head of hair. That's kind of where my mind went. But I do think the math is important. It's a reason why on this program, we don't do the hype cycle thing. We're not talking about how much money has a company raised this week. We are very interested in big deals, in big closes, in things that move the needle for a company and for the end user, whether that's in the hard tech and industrial space, whether that's in the defense space, or anywhere in between. Thank you, Ben, for that excellent breakdown. Professor Ben, he's here all week, folks. We might have him come back. Ben may have to explain some new stuff to us next week. So go ahead, leave in the comments. Comment Ben, and we'll send you your very own custom Ben explainer video. All right. I know you got to catch your breath, big dog, but that was awesome. And I think we've reached the time in this program where you get to tie one on one more time. Ben, I think it's time to blow off some steam. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, something, I mentioned this earlier, but I think it ties into a lot of the stories that we talked about today. It is a moment of change. There are a lot of exciting things happening. And there's going to be a reshuffling of these players, of the primes, of the neo primes, of AI companies that we didn't know before, but now have huge amounts of power, right? Of all these, the system integrators, of all these new rollouts and all these new players. But then the question is, how do we not stagnate? How do we make sure we're constantly evolving, right? How do we make sure we're constantly reinventing ourselves? You might be shocked to know I love doing yoga despite being a Marine. But my yoga teacher says every breath is a chance to reinvent ourselves, right? So let's make sure in our national security space, in our defense tech space, in our hard manufacturing space, we are constantly reinventing ourselves and we do not get stagnant.
I love that. And your yoga teacher is cordially invited to the Steam Zone anytime he or she wishes, hopefully as soon as next week. All right, my turn. I got one thing to share with everybody today, and that's a tourist with a map is still a tourist. Ladies and gentlemen, over the last week or two, I've had more conversations with folks than in the last year, with folks who are starting to invest maybe in defense or starting to invest in manufacturing. And they say, I'm kind of a tourist. I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I know it's hot and I want to catch the wave. And I know it's tempting. Because sometimes I have the same impulse to say, oh my gosh, this person doesn't know what the heck they're doing, and throw them out on their butt. But don't forget your commandments. Don't forget the wise axiom of treat others the way you want to be treated here. A tourist is good for the economy. We benefit from tourists in the United States the same way that Americans are tourists around the world. The same is true in our critical industries, which is more attention, more good people wanting to deploy capital, attract talent, start companies in these spaces. Yes, it can get frothy. Yes, there can be some resentment when somebody else raises because they got a big name and maybe it was harder for you. I get that. But at the end of the day, if you're in these industries, it's because you believe in the mission. And if you believe in the mission, you want America to win. And America wins when we all can participate in the mission. So my ask to everybody here is when you see a tourist, if their map is upside down, turn that sucker right around for them. When somebody's about to write a big fat check into a company that has won an IDIQ with no obligated funds, give them a helpful pointer. The karma will come back and it will only help you in the long run. Ben, we've had a good day here. We talked AI. We talked a couple of fights on LinkedIn and Twitter. We did a little math. Sum it all up for us. How you feeling at the end of this Steam Zone?
I'm just focused on what math I'm going to present next week. So maybe ChatGPT can help me do that.
All right, I am off to a factory opening. Thanks to our friends and congratulations to our friends at Union. Thank you for watching the Steam Zone, and we will see you next week.